All right, well, let's just wing this and see where this goes. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to IORadio with your hosts, Adam and Sal.
Hi, everybody.
So this was just another impromptu meeting. We were going to be continuing our thing of talking about crypto talking points, and this is kind of a crypto talking point. I guess it would fit in, but it's not. I don't think it's one of the ones I have in my list of tired talking points. Maybe I do. If not, it needs to be there. I am getting so tired of people comparing crypto to the internet as if, in the internet, nobody believed in it. They all thought it was a fad, just like crypto. But crypto's like the internet, dude.
It's interesting because that's actually your real voice.
Yeah, this is my fake voice.
And this is my real voice, man.
I don't know. I need to have like a prototype crypto bro voice that I can use whenever I want to.
I think you're onto something there. I think that's a good one. Stick with that. Work with that character.
Yeah, and for those that the last episode I was too hard on that guy, I'm like, I don't think I was hard enough, to be honest. Did you get any feedback from that?
I mean, I read the YouTube comments. So thank you for participating and listening.
Comments?
And commenting.
Plural?
Yeah.
There was more than one?
Yeah, you saw there was more than one. You hearted, you approved, you liked a bunch of the comments. There's definitely more than one. I don't know. I'm not sure that really went anywhere. I don't think my opinion has changed. Maybe if we speak to somebody else, it'll be interesting. I think we learned maybe how to try to keep people on point a bit more, kind of hold their feet to the fire a bit more.
Yeah, but I don't think we accomplished anything. You hold their feet to the fire and they put on a new pair of slippers.
It's just so similar to the actual systems themselves with this like utility, the speculative utility. It doesn't matter what it is, it changes, it shifts, it morphs, it becomes whatever services crypto's prime directive, which is to pump the token price up and take as much fiat liquidity from other people as you can.
Yeah, I got into an argument today with a crypto bro, and he was saying, why do you hate crypto? Look at what's happened with crypto since its inception. It's evolved. It's become so many things. And I'm like, no, it hasn't. It's just changed its outfit. It just put different shades of lipstick on the same pig.
Well, it's like the emperor has no clothes, but everybody's talking about how his latest outfit is great.
Yeah. Yeah. Nobody's talking about NFTs now. What happened with that? It was an evolution of blockchain.
Well, all those Bored Apes got stolen.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Boo hoo.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
I read a Twitter comment and it was something like, don't worry, guys, I'm going to draw some police for you to call.
That's a good one. Yeah, I've got some goodies. I've been in the trenches as usual, and all this stuff is fresh on my mind, so I want to kind of get into it. We're going to do a brain dump on just more of being in the trenches, trying to educate people. And of course, we already did a show about why we don't hate crypto, or why do you hate crypto? Didn't we do one like that?
Yes.
Because that's the first thing everybody says, you hate crypto. And I think we went into why our position is on this. So we're not going to cover that again, but you can go back to a previous episode and it's like, we go into exact details about why we do what we do.
Yeah, I think we talked a bit about our motivations. I mean, we've only done 21 episodes and I can't even remember half the stuff we've talked about, but right. I do think we talked about our motivations.
Yeah. So if you're going to say you just hate crypto, go back and listen to that other episode. You can see that's not the case. But today I really want to talk about this one analogy that just keeps coming up that just will not die, which is, dude, man, people didn't believe in the internet when it first came out either. So let me play a few clips that I've got. Let's go to this first one. This is what I saw the other day, which somebody posted it in our community as something that kind of we can identify with. So this guy, I don't know who this Pinboard founder is. Do you know what Pinboard is?
No.
Anyway,
I've never heard of it.
I'm following him on Twitter, Shitter, or whatever it's called. He has some interesting things to say, but what's interesting is watch how the CNBC commentator just immediately goes into apologist mode. There's no actual journalism happening here, right? CNBC, they're supposed to be interviewing people for their perspectives. They let this guy speak, and then she just interrupts him and starts to argue with him. I thought you're supposed to report news, not try to reshape it, but you'll see what I'm talking about.
Let's bring in Maciej Czajkowski. You may know him as Pinboard on the internet. Mate, good morning. Lay out your bear case for cryptos for our audience.
My bear case is that it's a giant pyramid scheme, and people are getting sucked into it. Unfortunately, it's a pyramid scheme that has a core of true believers and a core of people who are really fascinated by a technology. So it becomes difficult. It also has a group of very smart investors and all kinds of people who are heavily pouring money into it. So it becomes difficult to call it out, but I think it is very necessary to call it out because in the end, like every pyramid scheme, people are going to get hurt.
It may be necessary to call out certain aspects of it, but calling it a pyramid scheme is too simplistic, no, to even call the technology behind it. 25 years ago, critics said that the internet would amount to nothing. Some of the narrative at the time, it's decentralized, so you can't trust it.
She almost seems like she's a robot and she's starting to have a little robot stroke there. Did you hear that? You know, like her AI script kind of started dropping words or something.
Well, I mean, there's talking points. I wonder if this is if CNBC is one of the media organizations that has, is a partner, a quote unquote partner with Tim Draper's crypto investment company.
Well, certainly, you know, they take advertising money from crypto companies. So there's absolutely some motivation for them to hype it.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, it's nice to see this view represented on a network like CNBC, a mainstream network. I do think, though, that the argument is rather weak, and you can see that she picked up on it right away. He said that Bitcoin is a pyramid scheme, which obviously, if you go and interrogate the actual mechanisms that a pyramid scheme uses, Bitcoin is not a pyramid scheme. Just like if you go and interrogate the actual mechanisms of a Ponzi, it doesn't look like a Ponzi. It looks like a hybrid. It has these elements of both in it. So I think he would have been better off saying, hey, this is an investment fraud. And then
I think he's totally right.
I think he's right also. I think, though, the language he used potentially trips him up, but maybe we should watch the rest to see what happens.
Well, remember, this show is kind of about improper analogies to Bitcoin. I don't want to critique the critiquers here because we can go down a rabbit hole.
Well, I do think it's important for people to think about when they do critique this in public, how they do it and the pushback they're going to get. So it's a strategic thing as well for other people that want to oppose this technology.
You know, she just immediately started telling him he was wrong.
she just asserted, the technology means that it can't be a pyramid scheme. But what did you think about her saying that, you know, it's just like the internet? It's exactly what people said about the internet.
See, that's a distraction, right? He makes a specific claim. Now, me and you could argue, as you just did, that maybe he should have made that claim a little bit differently. But as you can tell, they're not drilling down, asking him more questions, asking him to qualify that. So no matter what he said, as soon as he comes on and he starts to be critical, they've got their little 7 talking points that they're going to, you know, oh, well, there was people that didn't believe in the internet too. You know, let's see how he responds. I haven't watched this whole thing, so we'll see.
Yeah.
Too many technical problems. It sounds a lot of what I'm
that didn't
hearing
happen.
from you and others around the bear case for cryptos at this point in time. Is it possible that we're just in the very, very early innings and this is a platform, not a pyramid scheme or even a store of value? It's more than that.
You want me to go back and get her whole thing?
This is going to be a 4-hour video on a 6-minute clip.
No, we got more clips. We're going to zoom through this. But let me go back. Let's just go back. All right. So now here's her response.
It may be necessary to call out certain aspects of it, but calling it a pyramid scheme is too simplistic, no, to even call the technology behind it. 25 years ago, critics said that the internet would amount to nothing.
Nobody said the internet would amount to nothing. I know Paul Krugman made some kind of a comment in his thing, and he already qualified that. It was in a particular context, and it was mainly the result of some people saying the internet was going to be it was going to replace everything in society. He was just kind of arguing against it becoming, you know.
Listen, there are a few people, and there's a few famous articles of people saying the internet wasn't going to amount to anything. What did people think at the time? The vast majority of people, including myself, and I'm sure you as well, immediately recognized how useful this was going to be and how important. That was the vast majority of people. Now, you can go and find people who didn't agree, but you actually have to try really, really hard to find those articles. And that's why the crypto people have to keep showing the same 2 or 3 articles.
Right.
Because it wasn't a widespread view that it was going to amount to anything. This is a rewriting of history.
And also, if you look at the people that were making those kind of comments, the very, very few and far between ones like Paul Krugman, and I think there's something out there from Bill Gates saying he didn't really see what the big deal was with the internet or something. These are all people that are in industries that are threatened by the internet. Paul Krugman worked for the New York Times, big major print publication. For a long time, the mainstream print media just didn't, they didn't know what to do. I remember I walked into an advertising agency trying to sell them on getting their clients to use the internet for advertising. And they looked at me like I was crazy. They're like, we don't see how we can make any money on this. So we're not going to really embrace it. So a lot of those industries really didn't know what to do. They didn't know where it was going to go. So they certainly weren't going to say it was the next big thing, because the New York Times, even to this day, the New York Times is trying to figure out how to stay profitable with the internet around.
Yeah, I mean, you also had people going in, the wrong direction. I remember there were banks thinking about they would make their own browser because they kind of viewed the browser as sort of the real estate on the internet. Like there was sort of strange ideas, but I mean,
lots of them. Everybody thought they were going to have their own radio station on the internet, and everybody was going to love their particular radio station.
Yeah, but like it didn't take 15 years to figure this stuff out, right? Within like a couple of years, the stuff had sort of coalesced and people saw what direction things were going in. It was pretty clear to almost everyone.
Right. So this comparison to the internet is so incredibly disingenuous. It really is. We'll continue and then we'll move on from here.
Some of the narrative at the time, it's decentralized, so you can't trust it. There will never be any internet payments, too many technical problems. It sounds a lot of what I'm hearing from you and others around the bear case for cryptos at this point in time. Is it possible that we're just in the very, very early innings, and this is a platform, not a pyramid scheme where...
So she claims that there was people in the early days that said, oh my God, it's decentralized. You can't trust it. That is nothing I ever heard. That's like projecting some criticisms of crypto. Yeah. All right.
Even a store of value, it's more than that.
That's an excellent point. And we have a history in tech of calling things stupid or pointless that end up being transformative. But it's really important to remember that these are not the early days of crypto. We've had Bitcoin for 13 years now.
15.
And when you look at it by its own criteria, all the things that it promised to do,
not in the same form, Mache.
Well,
you could argue that this phase is very different. You've got institutional interests, more companies. I'm sorry, go ahead.
But what you
She's interrupting him. Just let him fucking say his thing.
Yeah, I mean, how much of that is because of a delay and what's, because she corrected herself. She did say, hey, I'm interrupting you. So maybe there was a technical problem there.
But again, she knows how she pivoted. She pivoted from it was the early internet to now, there's institutional involvement. That's another talking point. Oh my God.
Well, he also agreed with the criticism.
Well, he wants to be on this. He wants to be invited back. He's not going to say you're crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, if they call me on there, I'm going to go, excellent question, Kathy. Let me tell you what I think.
Were you born when people started using the internet? Maybe not.
Yeah, she doesn't look like she's ever grown up without the internet, so she wouldn't know.
Yeah, I mean, she might be 30. Yeah.
Have as a gambling token, you don't have a currency. I can't buy a pizza with Bitcoin. I can't buy a car with Bitcoin. All I can do is put money into it and then watch it go up 20% and down 30% in the same day. Coming onto these calls, I had to take a look to make sure I was talking about whether, crypto is doubling today or halving. And that on every time scale, you see that volatility.
Good point.
And you see a symptom of what is a giant asset bubble. Basically, money has nowhere left to go. We've had this pandemic year where the stock market's almost doubled, where cryptocurrencies have gone up by a factor of 6, or I don't even know what Doge has gone up by. And it's froth. It's money desperately looking for somewhere where you can still get a big return, coupled with this, again, hardcore true believers who have a very strong and compelling technical and ideological case for why this is the wave of the future. But it's not.
So why can't he just say, if the host is pushing back on the idea that it's fraud, why not just say, well, this asks for money up front, and the only way that you can make your money back is from later investors? How does that sound like a normal thing to you? How does that sound?
Yeah, they didn't ask him that. They don't, because they know what the answer to that is.
He needs to ask that. Like, that's the point, is he needs to ask that question, because they're just pushing back and saying, no, you're crazy. It's not fraud. Everybody said this about the internet. And he's saying, well, no, it is fraud, but he can very easily flip the script on them, point out the basic functionality of how all of this works. Instead, he is going down, which is still a correct criticism. He's going down the road of okay, it's used for speculation, but ask the host. The host is the one that pushed back. Yeah. Ask them.
Well, also keep in mind that we could speculate forever on what they should have said. And anybody that's listening or watching our podcast could say the same thing. Sal and Adam should have said this. They should have said that. So that's we could go on forever about different ways we wish we could do things. I think it's more appropriate to talk about what they said and what they did and what might have been a bad decision for what they did.
Yeah, who is Pinboard anyways? I've never heard of this.
I don't know. Let's see if this clip is any good. If not, I'll cut it out. Let's see.
All right.
Don't know what's going to happen to different cryptocurrencies when we get a real protracted downturn. I mean, I could see an argument if there's a big difference between Bitcoin, Ethereum, Dogecoin. You're lumping them all in as one giant, I guess what Elon Musk would call hustle. But maybe they're not. And I guess it'll take some more stress to test that, right?
I would like to see at least one cryptocurrency that is able to just let me buy and sell things without paying. For example, for Bitcoin now, it's a $15 transaction fee. It burns as much electricity as the country of Argentina. It has a maximum capacity of 4 transactions a second compared to Visa, which is something like 1,800. All of these things, if it could just technically work for any practical use, I would have a much easier time saying that maybe one of these really will kind of pull forward and convince me that I'm wrong and convince all the other skeptics that are wrong. But right now what we're seeing is not that. What we're seeing is that it is a gambling token that many people believe can only go up for a variety of arguments, and has no connection to any sort of real world application except for the one thing that it has really revolutionized, which is crime.
That's a great quote that they put up there. Let's go back to that. The right way to think about cryptocurrency is not as a bubble, but as a blister. It will just keep refilling every time it pops until we find a cure for the underlying problem.
Yeah, that's why this opinion of crypto is going to go away on its own is false. It's too useful as a means of sucking money out of the regular economy.
So anyway, I don't know this guy Pinboard, but he does seem to be on the right track. It's nice to see more people get this. It's disappointing that the media still wants to kind of not ask him to qualify. Well, why do you think it's a Ponzi? Instead, they just kind of want to introduce this notion that maybe he could be wrong. We can find out who's right and who's wrong. That's kind of a journalistic thing that old style journalists used to do. They didn't just go, that's your opinion. Here's my opinion. I remember when it was like, that's what you think, but here's the truth.
The fact is, this show isn't journalism. It's entertainment. So if a large portion of the demographic are crypto bros, that's who they're going to pander to. And that's what you see. So the host said, oh, well, what about Ethereum and Doge and Bitcoin? All of these things are different. Well, they're not actually different. They all demand money up front. They all pay out returns from later investors. Functionally, they're the same.
Yeah, and we're beating that dead horse. It's a Ponzi. It's a Ponzi. It's a Ponzi.
I know.
But the media doesn't want to talk about it. So I don't want to be like a broken record, but I do want to point out some of the things that they say that are categorically wrong. Let's see if we can. Let's go. Let's see if we can catch a few more. And I got another clip I want to show you of Mark Anderson.
Bitcoin has made it possible to have a whole industry around ransomware. We just saw that with the Capital Pipeline, and it's made money laundering much easier. So those are the actual 2 genuine areas where cryptocurrency has had a transformative effect. I think it would be nice to have a positive and not just the net negatives before we all move off of the dollar or gold coins or whatever we're hoarding right now.
Good point.
I think that's an interesting point, and it makes me wonder about whether yesterday's action, where you had a 40% swing in 24 hours on the most broadly accepted name, I wonder, do you think that was a death knell for another large vendor coming out and saying we will accept Bitcoin for our goods or service or car or pizza or anything else?
I think you're not going to see many vendors coming out to actually accept the money, except maybe on the terms that Tesla offered, that if we need to refund it, we're going to do it in dollars or whatever the real currency is. But what I think you'll see is a lot more institutional investors dipping a toe into it because they don't want to miss out on the wild ride. So these constant dips and highs, they've been with us since the start of the cryptocurrency. It's just that more people are paying attention because the valuations are so high. But the root problem is not in crypto itself. It's the fact that, capitalism is constipated. There's nowhere for all of this flow to go. We have a massive amount of invested money and no real productive use to put it to. So it's just desperately chasing around. This bubble isn't just in cryptocurrency. You see this in, stamp collecting, coin collecting, NFTs, even GameStop stock now has kind of become dissociated from the actual ticker or the company that has physical stores and has become sort
very
of a meme
interesting and a good point that he brings up, and I want to talk about that. Did it occur to you that capitalism is constipated and people have extra money that they're just looking to put into something?
Well, this has been talked about for a long time in terms of crypto. I'm just a bit surprised he didn't sort of push back on the valuation and the idea that, he seems to be agreeing that these are sort of totally correct values. There's no tether, there's no price manipulation. So that's unfortunate to see. But yeah, of course the crypto market's been pushed up by additional liquidity in the economy.
Well, notice he just said it was high valuation. He didn't necessarily quote any of those numbers, which we all would agree are fictitious. I think it's safe to say crypto does have a high valuation, probably nowhere near as much as what they think, though. But it's interesting. He seems to think maybe the crypto boom is a kind of a symptom of there being just too much excess capital and people that are bored and feel like they want to do something crazy with it.
Well, it's also a symptom of a financial system that isn't constrained so that investment is actually put to productive use, right? Right now, the way you make a fortune, the way you make, your 100x multiple is you try to build a monopoly, right? You give something away, you get as many users as possible, you buy out the competition or destroy them somehow, get a monopoly, and then jack the prices.
Well, that's one way. There's lots of different ways. There's gambling, there's betting on stocks and hoping that they go 10x or whatever.
Again, unearned income. So there's a lot of focus on unearned income. And this is ultimately not economically productive. Crypto is just a weaponization of trends that have been occurring for, 50 years.
Well, I think crypto kind of panders to a number of certain kind of mentalities. There's the one that, you feel like you should be richer than you really are, that society has been unfair to you. And so crypto kind of taps into that. If I play my cards right with this, I could, move up a few levels quickly. And then there's also just that general libertarian distrust of the government of, blaming everything on the government. And this thing is supposed to be separate from the government. So that somehow is good. There's no consistency to any of it, though. So we'll bypass this, and I want to show this other one. This is Mark Andreessen.
Andreessen.
I guess he's the guy that created the Mosaic browser, or is that who I'm thinking of?
Yeah, if he created it, or I'm not sure.
He's behind Netscape, right?
Yeah, he was involved in I believe it was Mosaic.
So again, just because he was one of the early pioneers in the internet does not mean he's a freaking genius. I'm sure some of the founding fathers of our country were probably really whacked out. Some of them were really intelligent and geniuses, and some of them were probably just there because they just happened to be around. And I think this guy may be one of them, as you'll see what he has to say. This is one of those little shorts, so it's in a weird video format. So bear with me.
Is this.
Wait, you've never said this?
I never said it about anything else between the original internet and then the emergence of crypto. When you get something like this that has a movement, that has this sort of collective effect, has a movement behind it, and is attracting many of the world's smartest people to work on it, the criticisms play out differently than the critics think. So the critics make this long list of all of the problems, but you're getting these genius engineers and
All right, hold up. First off, this is edited so wacky that there's no way to know for sure if this is what he actually said. But assuming he did say this, I don't see all of the geniuses in crypto. Do you?
So I need to correct myself very quickly. Mark Andreessen was one of the developers of Mosaic. Mm-hmm. So he was a developer at one time. And
that's what I said.
He was technically competent. I see lots of smart people working at crypto. I see lots of intelligent people.
Not smart people. He said geniuses.
Sure.
Name a genius that's working in crypto.
How do you even determine who's a genius and who isn't?
Well,
how do you even define that? Like, they're going to use racist metrics like IQ. Like, how are we going to determine, geniuses? I'll say that there's lots of smart people working in crypto.
If they're so smart, why can't they create one goddamn thing that does better than non-crypto technology?
Well, have you ever? I think who was it?
I think even non-geniuses could do that.
No, Nick Weaver had a good point. He calls it. There's an XKCD.
Why are you arguing against me? I don't get this.
I'm not arguing against you. I think it's interesting because there are.
So where are all these geniuses? Where are the software engineers that you idolize in this field? Can you name anybody working in the crypto field that you're like, man, I wish he was working for me?
No, absolutely not. Like, I don't have that kind of detailed knowledge.
Well, then why do you think there's anybody that's worth anything in this industry?
Do you know every single developer that works in the industry?
I'm not trying to prove a negative. He's making a positive claim that the industry is full of geniuses.
Sure, and he's full of shit.
And I asked you, can you corroborate what he says? And now you're just dancing all over the place. Either you say I don't know, or this guy's a genius.
Okay, so you're saying he literally means like there's Einsteins and Richard Feynmans working in crypto. I took that statement to mean something else. I took it to mean he's talking about there are smart people who are working in the industry. So if you want to say, are there, I don't know, qualified geniuses? I'm not sure how you would do that. There are qualified geniuses in the crypto industry. No, I won't say that. If you want to say there are some smart people that are working in the crypto industry that maybe find these problems intellectually
That's not what he said, though. I mean, genius is supposed to be upper echelon of intelligence and capability. A genius genius on a violin is somebody who can play it like nobody's ever fucking done it before. I mean, that's the words mean things. And this guy, a lot of people would say, was one of the geniuses in the early internet to create Mosaic, right? So I'm just wondering, where are these? I mean, I guess maybe he's just referring to himself. Maybe he thinks he's the only genius in crypto.
Who knows? Who knows? How do you qualify? Is Bill Gates a genius?
I would argue on that too. Same thing with Steve Jobs. Sometimes it's being in the right place at the right time, and most of the time it's having contacts and connections.
And being a psychopath helps too sometimes.
Yes. If you, as far as making money, absolutely. But the point is, he's saying this field is full of these amazing geniuses and entrepreneurs. I don't see that. Most of the people that I see, look at Sam Bankman-Fried. He might have been a smart kid. He might even be genius in some weird kind of, spectrum level, but he didn't create anything except just grift.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of really talented con artists in this industry.
Yeah, I wouldn't call them geniuses.
I would call them, they're geniuses at being ethically compromised and at swindling people.
Yes, okay, you're right. That's a field that I never really thought we should honor its best and brightest. But
Ponzi was an innovator. Like, let's give credit where credit was due.
Yeah, he was, absolutely. I'm sure Bernie Madoff is like, is he still alive? Did he die?
Nah, he's dead.
But if he was alive, he probably would be like, motherfucker, I should have gotten into crypto.
We should start like the annual Madoff Awards, and we should hand out like an award to the biggest con artist that year. Crypto would dominate.
Yeah. Okay, let's see what else this guy goes off on.
Entrepreneurs flood into the space, which is what's happening right now. And what happens is they look at that list of problems as a list of opportunities. They're like, okay, like that's the punch list. Like these are the things that I can do, because if I fix these problems, it's going to be really important. It's going to really matter. I'm going to be famous, right? I can build a real business. Like, this is going to be how I'm going to make my mark in the world.
So what problems have any of these guys solved? Only problems I see them solving in the crypto space are problems that crypto created. So he's just blabbing here, making these claims, and you notice it's all vague and ambiguous, right? He's not saying this guy solved this particular problem. He's making this vague claim that we can't really fact check because there's no information there.
Listen, before crypto, there was a problem. How am I going to monetize my ability to create malicious software? Boom, ransomware, problem solved.
All right, right. We recognize that the closest that crypto has to an actual, possibly uniquely efficient use case is criminal activity, cyber terrorism, money laundering, all of that. I really do not want that to be the best answer anybody can come up with. If that's the best answer.
I think that it is. I think that is the best answer right now.
Yeah, you're probably right, but I don't even want to choose that as an answer. It's like that guy said, is there anything positive that crypto can do? So let's see if Mark Andreessen is going to be specific enough to be fact-checked here.
Fix these problems. There's the reality of what you have today. There's all the critics who are arguing against the reality of what you have today. In a lot of cases, they're actually right, but the fact that they're right is actually totally beside the point, because what they're not understanding is the potential. They're not understanding what this is going to turn into, and
it's still early, dude.
It's still early. It's still early. Hodl those coins. Don't liquidate
DCA.
them. Don't pull out your money.
You understand.
Keep the money in.
Yeah. All right, just wait.
Always the same.
Just 15 years. 15 years.
Not going to understand what happens when a lot of the world's smartest people devote themselves to solving all these problems. That's how you.
Again, where are the world's smartest people?
It's often this thing makes me think about the history of nuclear weapons and their development. At one point, before the end of the Cold War, about 50% of the world's scientists were engaged in programs related to nuclear weapons, whether it was guidance systems or rockets or cooling systems or the warheads themselves.
Right.
And I'm not sure that was the most productive use of human talent. So just because a bunch of smart people are working on something doesn't necessarily mean it's what we should have them working on.
Right. And also, just because you're intelligent doesn't mean you're not a psychopath,
Yeah, or you can be fooled. Smart people are fooled all the time, right? Yeah. We're human.
In fact, I think it's pretty well established in areas of psychology that somebody who may be a genius in one particular field could very well likely be really stupid in others, just because they tend to be so good in one area because that's where they expend all their brain energy. And so they're actually undeveloped in other areas,
Yeah, there's a lot of people in tech who are sort of talking examples of Dunning-Kruger, where because they understand technology very well, or they understand computer science very well, they assume they have perfect knowledge in many other areas.
Yeah, like the guy that's behind the DNA sequencing, who is a religious apologist, that's outside of his area. Even though he is a scientist, apparently his scientific method kind of stops in his compartment. All right, so I'm really disappointed that Mark is spewing this crap. I really am. But again,
why? He's a billionaire,
right? He's the one that has.
He's going to spew.
He's got the venture capital firm, right? That is funding a lot of this shit. So
listen, you know what's hard? Making money and having to work for it. That's hard. You know what's better? Not having to work and getting money.
Well, he's
not having to do anything productive. And
he had to get up and put on a sweatshirt and talk on a microphone. That's probably work to him.
Yeah. But, apparently he's solving problems in the world.
Him and the world's smartest people who shall remain nameless.
Nothing was said there. Let's be honest. We just watched that short and absolutely nothing was said.
Yep.
I mean, I don't know. I didn't really hear anything.
Okay, so here's another one, and I'll play this, and then we'll kind of give our little monologue. Final stuff. I haven't watched this, but it says, "Here's how Bitcoin is like."
Well, that's from 9 years ago.
Well, then certainly their predictions.
Then. Yeah. Okay.
Give it 5 years. See, I bet they won't say anything specific like that. That would be great if they said, look, we're only 9 years into the internet, or we're only 5 years in. In another 5 years, just wait. Let's see.
I want to talk about Bitcoin because we had some very interesting developments this week with the IRS coming out and saying, Bitcoin, this is property, it's not a currency. I know that you've written about this. You've talked about how Bitcoin is a little bit like the internet in the early 90s. Explain your thesis, because I might want to poke some holes in that one. Go ahead.
Oh, I like her.
Think of Bitcoin as a protocol, just as the internet is a protocol. But up until we had Netscape, we didn't really have a way for people to get around the internet, and you didn't see wide adoption of the.
Did you catch the company that guy was with? Because I would love to look it up and see whether he's in jail right now.
I'm already doing that, actually.
All right. So, okay, you let me know what you do. We're going to let this thing roll.
Internet really until then. Bitcoin is the same way, and I think because people focus on the price of Bitcoin so much as an asset, they don't really get the power of the underlying protocol. And what we're going to see coming up over the next couple of years, and it's already starting, is you're going to see apps basically built on top of this protocol that allow people to interact with Bitcoin better. And you're going to see the view of Bitcoin move away from an asset that people just want to hold as an appreciating thing and more as a tool to transfer value amongst people.
See, what I would say is, I agree with you in that it could be an amazing tool to transfer value. The technology behind this is pretty incredible.
Again, she's spewing talking points too. The technology behind this is pretty incredible, which if you've seen my documentary, you'll realize it's not incredible. It's actually pretty obsolete already. And this guy is, again, hiding behind these vague abstractions. And no, I am not going to put an abstraction meter on this stuff anymore. That was a lot of work in the last episode. It really was.
Well, it looks like Estimize maybe went out of business in 2021. It's hard to say. Maybe it was sold. But this gentleman doesn't look like he's starting, a crypto company himself or a coin. It looks like he's building the shovels that he's been selling to the crypto people. So he's doing like data analytics on stuff. And I'm not sure that it only applies to crypto. So it looks like he did actually build a real product. But this is from me looking at, a one website page and a LinkedIn.
Yeah, right. And this is 9 years old. He's saying in the next couple of years, there's going to be a lot more utility built onto internet. And we've seen more inter-ecosystems things, bridges and chains and stuff like that. And of course, everyone has got their own proprietary coin. And now you've got all these extra blockchains and you've got all of these other things, but they still have not created anything of value in the real world. And this is 9 years after this guy's saying there was supposed to be something there. So let's see what she's going to say.
I also question whether Bitcoin is really the vehicle that ultimately survives. And I think back to the days of Napster, for example, and when people wanted to share downloaded music. Napster was hit with a whole slew of legal hurdles with music industry coming out and saying, no, you just can't do this. But it was also pretty innocent, right? In that it was just a bunch of kids, trying to share music files. So they were filling a need in the marketplace. On the other hand, you got Bitcoin, which also is running into a lot of legal troubles, if you would. And there's more incentive for federal authorities to come down hard. It's not just the music industry, it's federal authorities that want to come down on hard.
Yep, she was right.
Bitcoin pretty hard because of the illegal sort of element around this. In other words, one of the reasons it was first used was to buy drugs on silkroad.com, the eBay of drugs. So is this different in that will authorities have a bigger problem with it because of its origins, because of this sort of tainted feeling that it's associated with the underworld?
So two major things there. All major trends start with, a small group of people with a very specific interest in seeing that technology develop, and they spread out from there. And there was a great blog post, I don't remember who it was written by the other day, but it was basically, what would happen if the federal government introduced cash today into the market, and cash had not existed before, and all of the issues.
This sounds like a distraction.
And it was worse. Basically, all of those things are worse than Bitcoin. Right. But think
why
about
are we talking about a hypothetical?
For buying and
He's
selling
distracting
illicit things, or it's even better than Bitcoin is at doing that. And the other major thing is...
Though not online. In person.
Though not online. Yeah, I completely agree.
Yeah.
But Bitcoin...
And harder to transfer cash, say, from country to country than it would be with Bitcoin.
So the biggest thing about Bitcoin
She
here is
just
the government
poked holes in his
taxation.
hypothetical.
And this is where the IRS ruling the other day really comes in and has hurt Bitcoin over the last couple of days, but I believe won't hurt Bitcoin in the long term.
How has it hurt Bitcoin over the last couple of days? I mean, other than we've seen the price decline.
If you bought a Bitcoin for $500 today, and 3 days from now Bitcoin was worth $550, and you went and bought, you know, a latte with that Bitcoin or a piece of that Bitcoin, what the government is saying is you need to pay taxes on the appreciation of that Bitcoin, even though you used it to buy a physical good. And you have to keep track of the appreciation and what you bought.
But that's the same thing with regular money. You have to do that. You know, when you spend money, your value is going from one person to another. People have to pay taxes on it.
And what
yeah, I mean, there's sales
people
taxes.
are saying is that's going to make it unduly, you know,
totally
hard for people to use it.
Well, this is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I mean, so you have a government, not a music industry, a government that's not supportive of this right now, that's looking for ways to regulate it. So ultimately, does someone harness this technology, work with the government, or have more regulation involved to create a product?
Somebody like maybe Sam Bankman-Fried?
Jesus.
I bet you he was watching this going, let's get some lobbyists on the phone.
Yeah, 2014. So this was 2014. So
that
6
can do a
years,
lot of what
5
Bitcoin
years.
can already do, but does it within the confines of a legal structure.
So there will be regulated apps, you know, basically. But I think when you think about the difference between Napster and Bitcoin, Napster was a company. Napster was not an open source piece of software. And that's why it got taken down at the end of the day, because the founders couldn't deal with all of that pressure being on themselves and the legal ramifications of that personally. But Bitcoin, nobody controls Bitcoin. There's nobody to sue.
Well, in fairness, the whole
talking points.
The whole the whole P2P thing. You're right. Napster was a particular piece of software, but there was LimeWire. There was a whole bunch of these things, and there's BitTorrent, right? Well, you know, if you use BitTorrent on your ISP thing, you'll get a letter from your ISP saying, "Hey, we noticed you did this. You know, if you keep doing this, we're going to turn you over to so and so and cut your internet." You know, so that's the protocol. That is the protocol that the government and the industries are cracking down on, not individual software. So they could do the same thing with Bitcoin.
I just feel like there's this huge, like this discussion of like Napster and Bitcoin. There's this huge elephant in the room that's not being talked about, which is Napster never made victims into victimizers. Right. There was no financial incentive once I had shared music on Napster to go and have all my friends share their music also.
Right. It wasn't a pyramid scheme.
So like that's I think what's being underestimated. We see in this clip from, you know, almost 10 years ago, that's what is underestimated, the way Bitcoin aligns financial incentives. And it's a fundamental difference between these two pieces of software, because of course Napster, I could just go and download it. I didn't have to pay for it. It wasn't like Napster charged me $100 and then let me access pirated music. You just got the software. It was useful. And so it was valuable because it was useful. Bitcoin is the opposite. It's
Napster wasn't turning people into
money.
millionaires either, and it wasn't enabling human trafficking and cyber terrorism.
Yeah, it wasn't letting you sell music online. Right.
I mean, if Napster had some way of facilitating, you know, large amounts of crime, then we could probably compare it to crypto.
You can sue the individual apps, but there will always be another app, and you can put that app offshore. So it's very different.
But then it runs into the hurdles of, you know, do I really want to put my money in Bitcoin if I'm worried about the volatility of
So here's the important aspect of that. You're going to see apps built on top of Bitcoin where there's no currency risk associated with using Bitcoin as the protocol. And this is what I wrote about the other day. Where
Really? It's 9 years later, dude. That hasn't happened.
He's saying there's no risk?
Yeah, there's going to be apps built on the Bitcoin network where there will not be any liability in using the crypto. Really? How'd that turn out?
Yep.
At least that was a specific enough claim. I like that.
you could basically build a new ACH on top of Bitcoin where money gets transferred from your bank account to something like Coinbase, and then Coinbase immediately to Bitcoin. The transfer of Bitcoin happens.
This is what Charlie Schreiner was doing with BitInstant.
Yes.
I mean, there was this instant transfer.
Exactly.
Which
and nobody
was
takes
great
currency
in theory.
risk. Yeah.
But, you know, he's now under house arrest because the Feds had busted him for allegedly money laundering.
Well, not everybody is, above board.
Yeah.
So let's get to the epilogue here, which is everybody comparing crypto and blockchain to the internet. I'm going to tell you why I think it's bullshit. And then, Sal, you could have the last word on this. This notion that I think we've already touched upon this point that some people were skeptical or didn't believe in it in the early days. Those were few and far between. The early internet could do some really cool things that people hadn't seen before. And that's my jag. If you're going to tell me that you got some new technology that's going to be something amazing, explain to me why I would want to use it. What does it do better than what I'm using now? And when the internet came along, they could answer that question. Just email in and of itself was revolutionary. Instead of postal mail, you could send a message to somebody instantly. We had telegrams and stuff like that, but you had to go to the telegram office. You had to pay a fee. Email, you could just send as much as you wanted back and forth. That was revolutionary. And then file attachments in email allowed you to send images and other things. So that was a direct threat to the fax industry, right? So people had fax machines hooked up to telephone lines, separate telephone lines. All of that was made obsolete by email and file attachments. So those are just two things that were basically obvious from day one of the internet, because then when the internet came around, there was information systems and people were sending emails before, but there wasn't a worldwide network. If you were on CompuServe, you could only send mail to somebody else who was on CompuServe. So the technology was there, but it wasn't as ubiquitous. And once the internet came along, where you had a network that no one corporation owned, that was revolutionary. And it absolutely did things better than what we had before. And I could explain it in two sentences: email, fax. Here's another one: being able to order stuff online. Now, before the internet came along, you could do mail order from catalogs. You could call people on the phone and say, I saw this thing, I want to order it. And you could do that, but you still were, kind of limited by the business hours. You had to talk to another person on the other end of the line, right? But with the internet and the World Wide Web, you could order stuff 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, 366 on leap years. You could order anytime. That was a feature that most people never had access to. And that's just several, and I could go on and on. Now, enter blockchain. I want somebody to tell me one thing, just one thing that blockchain does that is an improvement over the way we've done things before. Now, of course, when you ask a crypto bro that, they will give you a laundry list of vague, ambiguous things like it allows you to send money across the world instantly. And I've already debunked all of that in my documentary. So those claims are not true. And when you corner somebody and say, well, I can use PayPal and it's faster and easier than Bitcoin. Well, why do you hate crypto? They change the subject. So the ultimate thing they end up saying is, well, you don't understand. It's still early, the early internet. Nobody believed in the early. No, we did believe in the early internet. So please stop comparing crypto to the internet. Sal?
I think everything you said is correct. The only thing that this comparison serves is crypto propagandists, is people trying to convince you to invest money into their scheme, to say that it's still early, to try to get a veneer of utility from the internet by comparing it. Things are different. Not everything is the same. So you have to evaluate them based on their own merits and properties. Is blockchain useful? No. Was the early internet useful? Yes. I think that's fairly obvious. Yeah, I guess the question really is, how long do we have to wait? It's been 14 years. I'm still not using Bitcoin anywhere. I don't see people that actually want to use this because fundamentally these databases aren't useful. It's always more useful to use a centralized database. And these supposed advantages, these vague, nebulous advantages of they're predictable or they're decentralized, when we investigate them, they don't actually seem to exist. So maybe what we need to ask pro crypto people is just how long are we going to have to wait until crypto has a material impact on the real world? Yeah.
What is supposed to happen? I mean, you should at least be able to predict that. If you're building a flying car, We're waiting for the car to fly, right?
Yeah, like what
is Bitcoin going to do for us?
What's the use case? What's the specific use case? How is it going to be different than what we already
I guess we're just waiting for it to become $1 million of Bitcoin. And then suddenly all of the problems will be solved.
Well, then you have a new feudal system. Perfect.
All right, people, please stop comparing crypto to the internet. Apples and pap smears. Completely different things.
That's something you don't want to confuse, guys.
If you want to compare crypto to some technology, one of our members on the Discord named is the ISILZHA. I don't know how you would pronounce that. But he came up with the most hilarious analogy that I thought was very appropriate. He said, we should compare blockchain to juicers like Juicero because it was advertised as a new tech for fresh juice. It was overwrought and wasteful, actually did things worse than what was already available, and turned out to be a giant scam. And I actually think that's a great analogy, Juicero. You remember Juicero?
Oh, yeah. It was just squeezing out the packets of juice.
It was like a super expensive machine that would squeeze out packets of juice. And of course, you had to get the juice was their special juice in the special boxes. And then people found that they could just squeeze it out themselves easier than using the machine. What a scam.
It's one of those things where, I didn't do anything more useful than anything that already existed. But
worse.
At least
it did something worse.
I mean, at least it was a physical thing. At least it actually existed.
Fruit juice has material value.
Yeah, I mean, pricing fruit juice like HP printer ink, that is truly innovative.
Now, if they had taken the Juicero juice and instead of squeezing it, told people to hodl it because it was going to be worth a lot more in the future, that would be even cooler. Huh.
They could have released like rare juice combinations. Pineapple, mango, papaya in limited batches.
Right.
And then just, for like $1,000 per because they were going to increase in value.
Yeah. And then, of course, DCA, right? Maybe you can't afford a whole juice pack every week. So you put a little percentage of your salary aside, and maybe you just get one per month and you just store it away. So maybe that's it. So Juicero, I think, is a good example of a comparison to blockchain technology.
So blockchain, the Juicero of databases.
Psychologist on here to talk about this weird bubble these people find themselves in, where they just refuse to recognize that their version of how the world is supposed to work is pretty different from how it actually works. Like you said earlier, you said Bitcoin doesn't do anything useful, but to them, they think it does something useful, and they may even have a good argument within their own little ecosystem that it does something useful, but that's not the real world.
Yeah, or there's like an edge case, right? It's like this one guy in Panama bought a taco for $63, and that's why Bitcoin's useful. It's like, okay, well, so one person at one point used it and it was useful, but overall, when we look at the system, when we look at what it costs, when we look at the environmental externalities, when we look at the social harms that it enables, why are we doing this? And it's this hugely roundabout way to even get to something useful. It makes no sense.
Yeah. I was arguing with a guy today who insisted that crypto was better than dealing with the banks because banks can freeze all your credit cards and your accounts. And I'm like, what are you talking about? I've never had a bank, if you're using a credit card, that's credit. That's not your money. But all of my financial instruments work perfectly fine. And he's like, well, they don't for me. And I've been turned down by 3 or 4 different banks. And I'm like, yeah, you're doing something illegal, aren't you? That, I can't speak to that. I can't defend that.
Well, it's just they're so subjective, right? You can definitely find cases where people have been screwed over by financial institutions. And you can definitely find places in the United States or in Canada or in Europe that there's a lack of competition. So,
but those are generally edge cases. And of course, the same argument applies, though, for crypto. If you don't like it, fork your own bank, fork your own system.
I just don't see how that criticism, which is a valid criticism, in any way exonerates cryptocurrency, because when you ultimately look at it, all of these properties that you're talking about are worse.
Yep.
So now, like, if my debit card gets compromised and someone steals my money, okay, I may have an issue with the bank. I may have an issue getting that money back. I might have to wait a certain period of time, but at least there's a chance.
Yeah.
With crypto, there's none. If you lose your keys, that's it. You're done.
Yeah, no consumer protections. And that's a useful thing in the real world. In the real world. And the internet does things in the real world. It helps real people in the real world. You're not in a little internet bubble where people who aren't online have no understanding of what it is you do. Crypto is like that. So stop comparing crypto to the internet, people, please. That's all I got to say.
Beautiful. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for listening.